That's not one of my slides. Thank you all for coming today. This was supposed to be a placeholder for a photograph of my family's living room in Jordan in the 1980s. But the problem with working with archival photographs every single day is I start to forget if I've seen something in a photograph or if it's an actual memory. So I spent a couple of hours looking for this photograph, and I'm not sure if it actually exists. So instead, I'm just going to describe it to you. There was a sofa and a coffee table and a window that ran the length of the room, and a bookshelf with years of National Geographic magazines stacked on it. And I would pull them out and sit on the Persian rug. I'm sure my mom is here. I'm sure there was a Persian rug. And I would look at the pictures. The only magazine that I remember clearly had the picture of a hologram skull on the cover. Like many people, probably many people here, I used to use National Geographic to explore the places and experiences very far away from my own life. And it wasn't really until I started exploring my own family history, doing oral history interviews with my grandparents, looking through photographs, family photographs and archives of our family documents, that it occurred to me to even think about using it to look for something closer to home. And that's when I found this issue from January 1920 and an article called "The Last Israelitish Blood Sacrifice: How the Vanishing Samaritans Celebrate Passover on Sacred Mount Gerizim." My grandfather's family came from a village on the northern slope of Mount Gerizim called Rafidia, and my grandmother grew up on the stretch of road that connected Rafidia to the town of Nablus in the valley below. A high concentration of my family's history took place below the summit where these photographs were taken and where for thousands of years the Samaritan community has been performing their Passover rituals. I knew from my grandfather's stories that my family had been friendly with the Samaritan community for many generations and that they used to attend these rituals as spectators. So I started looking in the background and on the periphery of all the photographs, trying to find somebody who looked something like me or that looked like a younger version of one of the people that I had seen in the family albums. I didn't recognize any faces, but I did recognize one photograph, not because I had ever been there, but because I knew exactly where it was from my grandfather's description. So I started imagining. My great-grandfather Nasser would have taken his picture with his wife Antuse further down the road this way. My great-great-uncle's house, where my grandfather lived after he and his brothers fled from Haifa in 1948, was a little bit further down. The house where my grandmother grew up was across the road. The view from the Asi house next door was of the same mountain across the valley. And my great-uncle Fuad posed in his boss's car on one of the slopes further west. This photograph became a portal for me to travel across time and space to moments and places that I had never been to, but that I knew intimately. I immediately bought a digital subscription to the National Geographic magazine because it has an online archive, and I combed through the archive trying to find every single photograph of Palestine, story or photograph of Palestine. And in the process of mapping all of this out, I found a few interesting things. Over 80 features have been published about Palestine in National Geographic since 1909. Half of those articles were published in the December issue. I'm not giving out any prizes for why. Bethlehem is in Palestine. And together they contained over 1,000 images covering more than a century of visual history. This cultural obsession with Palestine as the Holy Land obviously didn't start in 1909, and it didn't start with National Geographic magazine, but it did create an interesting problem for travelers, photographers, and later correspondents who had to match the Holy Land of their religious and cultural imaginations against the realities of contemporary Palestine. This tension wasn't immediately apparent to me in the photographs, but became very clear in the voice that was contextualizing them through captions and text. This voice, the published voice, as I started calling it, spoke with an authority about Palestinians, often in ways that didn't match what I believed and knew about myself, my people, and our homeland. These weren't minor mistakes or mistranslations, but misrepresentations and feats of linguistics acrobatics aimed at closing that gap between what was in Palestine and what writers, photographers, and readers wanted to find there. As all marginalized, oppressed, colonized, and erased people know, the way you are represented, or misrepresented, or not represented at all has tremendous political consequences. This is especially true for Palestinians who have been ethnically cleansed, uprooted from their land and each other, have been relegated to refugee camps for multiple generations, and whose very existence has been questioned at times. I felt that there was some connection between the ways Palestinians had been represented historically, like I was seeing in National Geographic, and the way that we are represented and imagined today. And I wanted to find out what that link was. National Geographic offered an interesting case study because of how long and how consistently it had covered Palestine from a unique viewpoint which shaped American culture and was shaped by American culture. So 2 years ago, I approached Sarah, Kathy, and Renee, the dream team at the archive, and I asked them if I could do some research. I wanted to find out how these stories were constructed, who wrote them, how were they edited, who chose the images, who wrote the captions, what were the debates about these decisions, were there any debates at all? I started working at first with the paper archives looking for clues, and I found a few interesting leads, but not that many. And then Sarah took me down to the basement where the photo archive is located, and my project changed completely. Over 10,000 images of Palestine, most of them unpublished, beginning in the late 1800s, covering every corner of the country, photographs of things that I had never seen before. It was an amazing and debilitating number of photographs. I started flipping through them as fast as I could, just looking at one after the other. I think part of me was afraid that that would be my only chance to see them. Then, after I had my fill, I slowed down a little bit more, and I started reading the captions on the back. And suddenly, a voice of the photographer was telling me what to look at and what to see, instead of me deciding what I was looking at. I slowed down even more, and I began not only hearing the photographer's voice in the text and what they were writing, but also in the aesthetic and formal qualities of the photographs, how they were composed, what subjects were chosen, what technology they used, how skilled the making of the photograph was. And unlike the published voice, which sounded uniform and institutional, the photographers' voices had personalities, agendas, points of views, and prejudices. I want to show you an example how all of this came together for me. This is a photograph. It's an autochrome that was published in December 1926 in a photo essay called In the Birthplace of Christianity. It was taken in a village near Lake Tiberias in the north of Palestine called Khirbet Karaze by Maynard Owen Williams, who was one of National Geographic's most famous correspondents. The published caption says, "A desert woman encamped in the town of Woes. Chorazin, in Christ's day, was a city. Recent excavations have laid bare the walls of its basalt temple or synagogue, where men and women are shown treading the winepress. The woes Christ uttered fit the present case. Tyre and Sidon, humbled though they are, still exist. But at Chorazin, once so proud, only the black tents of Bedouins rise above the rocky fields where scarlet poppies nod." There are two other autochromes that were not published, and a handful of black and white photographs from the same visit. And when I looked at all the material together, I read all of the captions, I looked for clues in the photographs, and I added a little bit of my own knowledge and did some research about this village. An image and a story appeared to me about what happened that day. So Maynard Owen Williams shows up at the village, probably with a translator. He found the woman that he thought was the best looking to be his model for the day. He negotiated with her husband or her family or maybe the head of the village. He probably exchanged an amount of money. He decided where he wanted her to pose. He had her hold the water can the way she did. He had her grind the basalt grinding stone the way she did. And then he pulled out the autochrome equipment, which was very expensive and very hard to do, and he decided that he wanted to take some pictures, but what she was wearing was too black and boring. It didn't have any red in it, which is the favorite color of autochrome photographs. And so he tells her in his Arabic, he forgets the word for red, but he remembers the word for color, and he sends her to find something else to wear. So she goes to her sisters or her neighbors or her friends. Maybe she finds one of them at the shrine that was in this village where the villagers used to store their grain because they knew that nobody would steal from a shrine. And she told them in her Galilee Bedouin accent, I need something more colorful for the photograph. The photographer, maybe she called him al-ajnabi, the foreigner, wants me to wear something more colorful. And they give her some things. She sits and poses for a picture. He takes 3. He packs up her things. She goes back to her work. He leaves and publishes the photographs, and she never sees them again. This photograph does not document this woman or her life. It documents a moment, the encounter between the photographer, and his subject. And when I started thinking about the photographs in the archive this way, I realized that one side of that encounter, the side of the photographer, is well documented in the archive. We know who Maynard Owen Williams was. We know what his life was like. We know why he was there, why he took the pictures, what he did with the pictures. We know what he said about them in all of his captions. And we know very little, if anything, about this woman's life or her experience that day. And that's what was missing for me, was the voice of the subject. So how do we make space for her voice to balance out this unequal encounter between photographer and subject? How do we change the power dynamics that are frozen in this image and reproduced every time someone looks at it or listens to it? The main problem with trying to add the voice of the subject in archival photography that's this old is that basically everybody is dead. That's supposed to be a little bit of a joke. So my first idea was this. But that was taking a little bit too long to get a full caption. So I applied for a National Geographic storytelling grant, and I designed something else. This is a community-based research platform that connects thousands of unpublished images from the National Geographic Archive with Palestinian cultural heritage experts, community elders, and field researchers, in order to give them access to support their own work and research, and also to ask them to add new layers of knowledge, of indigenous knowledge and narrative to these images. The goal is to give a new life and meaning to these displaced images, and actually not just one life, but multiple new lives and multiple new meanings, and to activate them by reconnecting them to the people and the places that they came from. So each participant will be able to view the images and add their own descriptions, and build a new thread of perspectives. So to give you an example, one of our participants for this image, who is an expert in Palestinian jewelry, might have something to say about the necklace that this woman's wearing. She might tell us what the necklace was called, how it was made, what the meaning of the symbols on it are. Another participant from the area where this photograph was taken might be more interested in the plane that's behind her and what happened to this location. Someone might know who she is. I want to tell you a little story to give you an example, I think, that sums up what this project is all about. On December 22nd, 2017, I posted this picture on the project Instagram account. The Instagram account was really a way to sort of share a few of the things that I was finding in the archive, and also to see what happens when you spread these images further than just the small group of participants who we were inviting to look at the platform. I received a comment from Susie Says So. She said, "Do you have more? My grandmother was photographed for the December 1926 issue. I'm wondering if you found notes or backup docs for that article." Susie and I spoke on the phone. She lives in New York, and I found the photographs of her grandmother that were published. There were 3 of them. And the caption, she was also photographed by Maynard Owen Williams, the same photographer that I talked about before. This one, the caption says, "A Christian schoolgirl of Ramallah. A headscarf such as that worn by the young woman may have served Ruth when she gleaned an ephah of barley in the fields of Boaz." I told Susie that I was particularly interested in this photograph because the name Ruth, this biblical character, kept popping up in captions of women who were wearing embroidered tobes like this one, or who were doing some sort of agricultural work. And I was really interested in this sort of like using this woman as a stand-in for a Bible character. It was kind of part of the whole project from the beginning. And she told me that her grandmother's name was Regina. These are the other two photographs that were published in 1926, and there are many more from the series that were never published. Some are of Regina, some are of her with her friend, who I found out later is named Zahwe, and most of the captions are about the fine examples of embroidery that both of them are wearing in which they stitched themselves. Some of the captions are not. This photograph was captioned by Maynard Owen Williams as a very pretty Christian schoolgirl in the American Friends mission. This picture actually comes nearer to doing her justice than the other, but she was really better looking when she was not smiling, as much as this shows. I invited Susie to participate in the platform, and she added the following description to the same picture. I love this photo of my grandmother. As soon as I saw it, I recognized myself in her. I felt an immediate sense of responsibility to fulfill this girl's dreams. This photo was probably taken while she was a teenager, before she got married to my grandfather, Aziz, before she had 6 children, before they all immigrated. I never know which one it is. I know that birds migrate. People, Palestinian people, move to America on a one-way ticket and they never return, not even to visit. America took all her children away. She used to sit on the veranda of her house in Ramallah, waiting for letters from her sons, who she had sent to America to study. When I was a child, and I thought only in concrete terms, I imagined that she did nothing else. In her later years, she came to Jericho to spend time with us because my mother also had 6 kids. Since my aunts and uncles all moved to America, Teta Regina was all ours. I used to take off her headscarf and play with her hair. At age 63, Teta Regina died in my mother's arms of a heart attack, only 40 or so years after this photo was taken. I think she died because she got tired of waiting for the letters. Thank you.